So we're going to get into the main part of the program, which is talking with our guest speaker, Hans Jacob from Duke. Hans is a business development director focused on developing energy storage and microgrid projects in Duke Energy's regulated service territories. In his role, Hans is responsible for identifying optimal projects to solve utility grid issues and improve service to customers. So with that, I'd like to welcome Hans up, and we're going to grill you on some questions and find out a little bit more about what you're working on. So thanks for coming in. Appreciate it. Do you need water as well?
No, I'm good.
Okay. So, and thank you again to Duke for sponsoring and being a partner in the Accelerator program. Not only have they stepped up to really be a champion for this program, but has been very, very giving in their time and their resources to talk to the companies going through the program and help them really understand what the opportunities are in the energy field going forward. A lot of them are very, very early in the development of technologies, and they need that critical feedback from people, the boots on the ground that are actually working in the utilities, working on emerging technologies, so that's been incredibly helpful. So with that, I'd just like to thank you again and start out with, could you give us a quick background on how you came to work on the projects you're working on right now that are currently on your plate or will be on your plate as new technologies emerge?
Well, so I feel like your background, you got to go all the way back to college. And so I actually went to the University of Florida, go Gators, and I'm a mechanical engineer, and I started at nuclear power. So we have a nuclear power plant that's now retired and being decommissioned up in Crystal River. But I started my career there as an engineer supporting, operation of a nuclear power plant. And it was really there that I came to appreciate the challenge and opportunity of energy. If you look at that one facility, it created 20% of our energy needs for our Florida customers. And, and probably nobody else in here has ever been in a reactor building, but it's not a very large asset that's making that power. And so that really, kicked off my interest. I ended up moving over into transmission system operations as an engineer, supporting real-time operation. And so if any of you have ever lost power during a hurricane, there's actually people in a control center in St. Pete that are staring at screens and trying to figure out how to get your power back. And I supported those operation activities, post-hurricane response, trying to, optimize the power system to, provide least cost to our customers. And with that comes a lot of understanding of how the power system works. And if you're familiar with St. Pete, we have a power plant at Bartow. I actually noticed where your facility was actually where one of the first Duke power plants was. Right across the street is an old power plant called Bayboro, an old steam station. And back in the day, we used to create basically all the power locally. The system actually started as microgrids. So there was little power plants. There was another one on 16th Street, and that's basically where Duke started, was on 16th Street. So little power plants that would energize the local community. And as the system got bigger, we got interconnected. We started importing power from further away, and that's where problems and opportunities come up, because if you're moving power over long distances, you need transmission lines, there can be issues with generation that causes the need to reroute power, and got an understanding of that and came to really realize there's a good opportunity for energy storage there. Because if we can use our energy storage assets to kind of optimize the grid, put the batteries in places that are at the best locations for our customers from a reliability and from an economy aspect, it could really buy down the price to deliver power for our customers. So I came to that realization when I was at the control center. An opportunity came up and I took it to come over to do energy storage development. And that was about a little over 3 years ago, and been working in the group ever since. The one challenge is sometimes I feel like we're a startup for two reasons. One is there's a lot of failure. There's a lot of projects that we think are good opportunities and then for a variety of reasons just don't pan out. And then I'm talking to all types of different companies all the time. We're looking at a CO2 type of energy storage. And there's all type, that was actually, I was trying to think what startups have I really been working with. And they're a startup out of Italy. And they expand and compress CO2, which is ironic because CO2 is what's causing our current global warming crisis. But yeah, expansion and contraction of CO2 for energy storage, something that some startup in Italy came up with, and now they're going commercial, and there's a lot of opportunity there. And I'm curious if they have an incubator that helps them get going.
We had 250 plus companies apply for the Accelerator. There was one company that was in that space. I don't think they were beyond, we'll call it the white paper stage, so it was kind of like academic research, but not actually tangible work in that area. But we did have one company that was looking at, I would say, compressed gas, compressed air. I don't know if it was CO2, but
there's a lot of different ways to store it.
It was in that space, yeah. So those companies are out there. Whether they're real, I don't know. Again, I don't call winners and losers. I call balls and strikes once in a while. But I let the market decide which companies are actually going to survive.
Well, the interesting thing, going from a white paper to having a small prototype, one that could be in this room, massive endeavor.
Yeah.
Going from a small prototype to having one that connects to the bulk power system, I actually think is a larger endeavor, because you have to start to work with large corporations like Duke Energy that have certain risk tolerance and desire, and that's actually a challenge that I see of us working with startups. Is I talk to our supply chain people, and they run risk metrics on these companies, and they say, okay, show me 5 years of your account history.
Sure.
And it's like, well, we're only 3 years old. And so it's just it's large utilities need these small innovators to identify how we're going to decarbonize the grid into the future at a low cost. Right now, it can be done. It's just going to be expensive. And that's where there's a lot of opportunity for innovation, specifically around lower cost solutions that are better. The one that is always challenged to me is lithium batteries. Right? You can build lithium batteries for as long of a duration as you want. You just have to buy a new battery each time you make it a longer duration. So right now, it's common to consider lithium a 4-hour asset. So the sun goes down, right? So your solar turns off because the sun goes down, and you have 4 hours of discharging that battery. And the sun's not going to come up for another 12 hours in the winter.
Right.
And so I need 16 hours of storage.
Get comfortable with darkness or buy more batteries, right?
And so that's just, it's a challenge and an opportunity that we face. Is you could build a solution with lithium that would solve that problem, but it would be 4 times as expensive because you got to build 4-hour batteries.
Well, and that's why we're looking at startups. That's why we need that innovation from the grassroots. But in the program, we talk a lot about closing that risk gap. If they're going to go after a big logo like Duke Energy, they're going to have to be much more mature. They're going to have to be a scalable solution, and they're going to have to survive long enough to get to market with something that would be attractive to an entity as big as Duke. So going back a little bit and rewinding a little bit to talking about the steam plant across the street, is the pendulum swinging back in the direction of those micro generation facilities and microgrids? Is it purely going to be storage on a local level, or are we going to see more generation on a local level as well?
So if you drive around St. Pete, or even better, if you go to Google Maps and you just look at the local neighborhoods in St. Pete, there is a significant uptake of rooftop solar. And a lot of that is the net metering mechanism that we have to compensate our customers. But each one of those is a local generation asset. And if those customers choose to install batteries, they can now provide backup power to their home, or potentially in the future with the F-150 Lightning that can provide vehicle to home, where you can have your electric vehicle provide backup power to your home. For Florida, I think that's going to be a key solution for our resiliency needs. But Ken, how long have you been a Florida resident?
22 years.
Do you own a gas generator?
No, my house is plumbed for it, but I don't own one. Yeah.
So I refuse to buy one out of principle. And I'm also often tempted by it during hurricanes, and I refuse. And it's just, how can we have a better solution than diesel generators? Well, what if you had your car that you left plugged into your house that could provide backup power, right? What if you had solar on your roof that could recharge it during hurricane outages? And what if the utility could compensate you for using your vehicle so that we would help actually with your car payment? Right? Doesn't that sound better than just having a diesel generator in your garage or plumbed that you have to pay for maintenance, and it only comes into play whenever you lose power? So I think there's a lot of opportunity there. It just comes back down to cost and how the utility can value it. Duke, we have to have fair rates for our customers. We can't cross-subsidize. We can't take all the money from this customer base and give it to the people that choose to buy backup power for their homes. So there's a fair value that the utilities across the nation are working on trying to identify. And I really do think that's a good opportunity space. Going one step up from there, where it's multiple customers energized at the same time, that's a lot harder. I've got a couple of those projects we're working on, a couple of them in Florida, and the biggest issue is just back to the amount of energy that you have stored and the ability to recharge, whether it's from solar or some other means, that you go from, if you had solar and storage in your house, I would tell you that if you just control your AC, you should be able to never run out of power, right? You just might not have AC. Right. You can charge your phone, your fridge can stay on, but maybe you don't have AC.
That's a problem in my house, yeah.
Well, so then that's when you need more batteries or more solar.
Sure.
Or a diesel generator. For a multi-customer microgrid, like back in the day, we burned coal, we burned oil, we burned natural gas, which is a very energy-dense mechanism that you can have a big pile of it outside. And with multi-customer microgrids, that's going to be a tough one. That's basically just based on physics.
This comes up on a regular basis in my HOA meeting when they look at our retention pond and say, why can't we just cover that with solar panels and power the entire neighborhood, especially for the next hurricane? And maybe I need to have you over for one of the HOA meetings and give them the tough math on that one.
Yeah, you can install solar panels and you can connect it to the electric utility, but it's not connected to each house. So then you have to engineer a solution that allows it to be connected to each house independently. And then you can't re-energize the system off of solar, so you have to install batteries. And so and then you have the limited duration issue. Yeah. So you would be yelling at your neighbors to turn down their AC.
Oh, absolutely.
So that you can have your AC, to make you comfortable.
Yeah, no, that would break up the HOA very, very quickly. When that maybe, well, it depends. So we've talked about the grid, but there's, let me just dumb it down to two different categories of resilience and sustainability. Can you kill two birds with one stone? Is there a way to make the grid more resilient and increase our sustainability and help out the climate issues, or are those two separate issues?
Oh, I think they're incredibly related. So going back to the power system operations, there's a lot of things about power system operation. I could put you guys all to sleep. But basically we operate the power system so that the one worst thing could happen and our customers wouldn't notice. And normally the worst thing is a single power plant tripping. So, and I'm going to use a number, 1,000 megawatts, but just pay attention to the 1,000, right? So in Florida, let's say that we designed for 1,000 megawatt power plant to trip. The only reason why we do that is because we build power plants at 1,000 megawatts. If all of a sudden we start building multiple small power plants, you by nature have a more resilient system because your eggs are spread out in a whole bunch of different baskets. So that's one aspect of solar and batteries that really does, it's not appreciated, but you're slowly moving the needle towards more resiliency because instead of having all your eggs in one basket, you have all your eggs in all these baskets. And with batteries, it adds significant flexibility. Batteries can charge, right? I don't know if you knew this, but a coal power plant can't charge off the grid. You burn coal, you can't pull back power off the grid to then use it at a later date. And a battery can do that. So now I have all this additional flexibility that can be used for resiliency. There's periods where we have too much generation on the system. Charge your battery. There's periods where you don't have enough. That's where we discharge, just like a power plant. So I think energy storage, solar, it's moving us towards a more resilient system. I think we're a long ways before, again, I can power half of downtown St. Pete with a battery. That's the type of resiliency I think is a physics problem that we're a ways away from. But as far as just making the power system more resilient during hurricanes, I definitely think we're moving there, and those assets are sustainable. It's solar energy, it's energy storage, and we're shutting down other power plants as we build those.
How much of the solution to this is, dare I say, smart cities, smart homes, smart capabilities where if you are limited on the power, maybe after a storm or something like that, you can determine where it goes so that my neighbor isn't using their AC or it isn't being used for something that's not critical to the infrastructure, not critical to the community. How much of that solution helps you out? And are we getting closer to that actually happening, or are those just two separate worlds and you can't manage both?
Another great question. So Florida was actually one of the early adopters of load control. So the state of Florida has historically been summer peaking. So we have a lot of AC on the system. So in the summer, we have a lot of load, and that's actually when your power plants put out the least amount of energy. And back in the day, the Public Utility Commission, working with utilities, realized this is an opportunity. What if we can control customers' water heaters, pool pumps, and AC systems? right? The water heaters customers don't notice because there's a lot of hot water in there. So as long as you don't turn it off for too long, we can use that without customers noticing. The pool pumps, occasionally we will get calls because why is my fountain off?
Yep.
And then the ACs we reserve for system emergencies. And it actually doesn't turn off your AC completely. It just limits it to cycle for 30 minutes every hour.
Okay.
So you might, in 2 hours, you might start to say, well, why am I sweating a little bit? But it's not a health and safety issue.
Mm-hmm.
We did that in the 70s. So Florida actually led on this back in the 70s with a lot of homegrown type technology, radio paging systems, right? And we still have that today. And Duke is working on uplifting that. So we're coming up with new mechanisms of using, an Ecobee thermostat instead of an actual physical switch. We're working on looking at additional use cases that can increase resiliency. And a lot of the new companies we're working with, back to being startups. That they're not 30-year-old companies. It's not Emerson that's out there that has come up with
Honeywell.
It's not Honeywell. They might have the device, but it's other companies that have innovated around the usage and the control aspect of it. And Duke also is trying to internally innovate on this. And there's a lot of opportunity there.
Is that going to live at the device level? Is it going to live in my electrical panel in my garage? Or is it all the above are opportunities?
So the startups think it's everything.
Okay.
The electric panel is a really expensive way to do it.
Okay.
So there's some companies out there, if you've ever heard of Span,
Yep.
where they'll replace your entire panel and it has smart breakers in it, and that's just really expensive.
Yeah.
It's a lot cheaper to change out your thermostat for $100 than to change out your entire panel for $6,000, $8,000, $10,000, however much that is for your house. So I think on a cost-effective basis, it's really going to come down to individual devices. But that's not to say there's not opportunity for the smart panels to solve problems. We talk about EV charging. So one component of my team, it's kind of like a sister organization, has the EV program at Duke. And I drive an EV, so we talk about opportunities. And load control is a big one. You come home from work, and what do you do with your electric car? You're supposed to plug it in. I'm like 50-50 there. So I get home at 5 o'clock, and remember I told you we peak in the summer, in the afternoon, and so my house demand like doubles or triples. And so if I'm a TECO customer, if TECO was able to basically ask me if I could plug in, but then the car chooses not to charge for 4 hours, I'd be fine with that.
Yeah, that makes sense. At 2 in the morning, I can click on, and by the time you're
that's
done
all
with breakfast, yeah.
And that's all local. That's either in the car, it's in the controller, it's in the controller for your charger. And there's a lot of, that's going to be a big issue in the future because our electric grid is not designed for everybody to get home at 5 and plug in their electric car. So it can charge it at midnight, but if everybody in your community buys an electric car and plugs it in right when they get home from work or when they get off from remote working, maybe, that'd be kind of awkward, but maybe, walk out in your garage, plug it in just at the right time. It could provide a significant challenge for the electric utility.
Now, the laziness factor plays into that. They're going to plug it in or they're going to forget because they're not going to go back out after dinner, so that's not going to happen. So, yeah.
There's a lot. Distributed control is a big issue, and it's very complex. Is the big challenge of it. And then it comes back to cost effectiveness, right? A lot of these programs, Duke has an electric F-150 pilot that we've announced up in the Carolinas, where we will actually help pay for your lease for the electric F-150, and then we can use it during emergent grid needs, where we can discharge the battery back into the grid. And the question is, well, how much should we pay those customers for that? And one question is, well, what's the value? And then the other question is, how much do you have to pay them to actually get them to pick up the phone?
Yep.
And so you have to find the middle line, because if we're to say, hey, it's only worth $5, then who's going to let somebody control their brand new F-150 pickup truck that's electric for $5?
Right.
The incentive has to be there. And again, just like with any startup, you're dealing with early adopters. There are some people that are going to go, yes, it makes sense, and I'll sign up for that. And other people that are going to like, no, I bought my truck and I'm going to charge it when I want to. So this is a little bit of a flashback for me, and I wasn't thinking about that before we got into this, but in 1995-96 timeframe, I was working in Compact's internet division, and we had a sit-down meeting with the power company. I'm not sure which one in Texas, but we went and sat down with them, and their concept was, A, we're pulling fiber to every home. We're going to put a server in every home, which they called the power company furnace. And that was going to control all the different devices, and they were also going to own the internet into every home in Texas. That was the concept in 1995. It doesn't sound like we've moved very quickly in that direction. There were lots of reasons why that didn't happen. Obviously, fiber to every home was not going to be feasible for them to do that, but they did have that concept. They weren't thinking about electric F-150s, but they were thinking about your AC, they were thinking about your heater, even in Texas. They were thinking about, the freezer in the garage, all those different things, and thinking, how can we control those things? And I was having meetings at the same time with Honeywell and all those other companies. So everyone was talking about it in 95, 96, at the very, very beginning of, the commercial web. But it doesn't seem like the startups have fulfilled their promise to get there.
I mean, there's a lot of, I'd say, entrenchment. I just saw a recent news article that Apple has been sending certain people, I haven't figured out exactly where it is, notifications that their phone will charge during periods of high renewable energy on their local grid. Mm-hmm. So imagine a company like Apple and all of the phones that they have access to, that they can just tweak a little piece of code in their software and they can really change how the grid would operate, right? The Duke probably wouldn't even notice it, but at a global level, right, they'd be able to calculate the emission savings, but that's Apple. So how does a startup that has a similar idea, right? I'm sure there's a lot of startups that have had ideas like this. That says, hey, how can we control everybody's phone, right? Let's get them to install an app. Mm-hmm. And there's just a lot of friction for a lot of startups, depending on what space they're working in, between their idea and then the cost-effective mass adoption of the idea.
Well, you get into product life cycles, and if you've got fanboys replacing their Apple phone every 2 years when they come out with a new one, it's easier for them to get that technology into the marketplace. My air conditioner is the original one that came with the house, so that hasn't been replaced, nor has my refrigerator or any of those appliances. So I think the startup opportunity is going after those legacy devices that aren't going to be switched out every 2 years. And then Apple will do whatever they want to.
Yeah. Or I think a lot of startup opportunity is actually come up with a good idea and then
license it.
M&A.
Yeah. No, well, that's a good path if you can get that job. Yeah. What's something interesting about battery technology that the general public doesn't understand? I mean, I live in a world somewhere between AAAs and maybe D cells, and occasionally my car battery that gets replaced every 2 years. What don't we know about battery technology that would be helpful in understanding where the technology is going in the next couple of years? And what does it mean to have battery storage at the neighborhood level doing these type of things? What aha moments have you seen in your line of work that kind of give us some insight into where batteries are going 5-10 years down the road?
Well, right now it's expensive, but it's projected to come down in cost. So I'd say that's hopefully going to be eye-opening for all of us, is that, and it's really, energy storage is going to be driven by the EV market. We use the same type of cells that they put in electric vehicles. And so as the EV market explodes, as more and more people in this room drive electric cars, it's going to be cheaper and cheaper for us to install energy storage everywhere. Mm-hmm. But I'd say the big revelation is there's just not a lot on the system right now. Most people don't have an appreciation for how big the power system is. And, we have a lot of solar, but we don't have that much solar on the system, right? Duke is very proud. We're over 700 megawatts. I'm sure Lisa or one of my other peers could quote how many megawatts of solar. I haven't looked it up recently, but we have a very significant amount of solar on the system. Mm-hmm. But compared to the remainder of the fleet, we have a long ways to go. And we haven't really even started building battery storage. So really, I'd say that energy storage is still incredibly infantile, and there's just a long ways to go before a material amount of our power comes from energy storage.
But what about the battery technology, the underlying battery technology? Lead acid, NiCad, lithium ion, lithium salts, solid state batteries that aren't chemical processes. Are those newer technologies going to mature fast enough to impact what you're doing in the microgrid world? Or are we still going to be stuck with the battery chemistry that we have today?
So I've been working a lot on some recent projects looking at non-lithium alternatives. And the more that I work on those, the more that I see that lithium is going to be an incredible hurdle for any of those companies to overcome.
Okay. Repeat that.
Lithium.
It's going to be incredible
hurdle. So it's going to be very challenging for any of the non-lithium batteries to replace lithium. And that comes back to the duration. right? So lithium energy storage, I think, is really going to be solid at the 4-hour mark, and that's going to be incredibly challenging for anybody to compete against. And once you get to longer and longer durations, that's where you see a lot of the innovation. So there's companies out there with 10-hour, with 20-hour, with 100-hour storage. There's hydrogen that you can store for thousands of hours. And I think that's where we'll see a lot of disruption in the market. But I really think that the lithium batteries that are in my car is what I'm going to be developing in the next 10, maybe even 20 years on the grid for 4-hour type solutions. I think that's going to be a really hard hurdle to overcome.
Can we mine enough of that to make that actually happen?
Well, I was hoping you would ask me that question. So Duke Energy partners with EPRI, Electric Power Research Institute. It's one of our research partners. And I was on a recent call with them, and they were discussing supply chain issues. And oftentimes they discuss stationary storage, which we use lithium, and EVs in the same space. So they had the stationary storage expert on there and the EV expert on there. And they made an interesting claim that the lithium mines that we have permitted in the US today, assuming that they could come online and start to produce, which is a permitting hurdle, that could serve the entire global market for EVs in 2030. Which was not a small, they're not using they're not using like it's going to be 2% of the market. It was a relatively large share of the market, and that wasn't including other uses for lithium. But that's just in the States, and so I think there's a lot of lithium out there. There's not a lot of lithium mines out there.
Okay.
So it's what came first, the lithium mine or the need for the lithium? And I think that's where the industry right now is realizing there's a need for the lithium, and so there's a land rush for identifying those lithium mines. There's also concerns on rare earth elements like cobalt, where they can come out of like Congo that can have other challenges associated with it, and the industry is innovating away from those types of minerals. So I think there's a lot of innovation that can occur, and then I think there's just a lot of lithium metal out there that we can access. It's just a time.
And comets and things like that. So yeah. So we talked about home storage. We talked about my HOA, which is idealistically trying to do their own thing. What about commercial properties? What about everything from business towers to light industrial, someplace in Pinellas? Should they be building their own microgrid? Should they be building their own battery storage as part of their infrastructure to help out the overall grid, but also ensure the resilience of their business operations?
So that's a great question. And the industry has been moving so fast right now that we do not have appropriate mechanisms to compensate customers for home storage. This is something, again, back to the, what does the customer want to get paid and how much can Duke justify paying the customer? So right now, I'd say that that'd be a challenging business proposition. If you were a local small business owner and you wanted to build your own microgrid, and you gave Duke a call and said, hey, when should I dispatch this power and how much are you going to pay me for it? Wouldn't go out so well. In the near future, I'm optimistic we're going to continue to innovate and find new value streams for our customers. The challenge is, does that value stream ever get large enough to justify the investment? And then that comes back to the cost question. So right now, I don't think it would be cost effective for a customer to do that, to build solar on their roof. With net metering, that can be very cost effective. Incorporating battery storage, that's a question of how much do you like your lights to stay on. So if you have a critical, if you're a critical store like a Publix, right? Maybe that's where the innovation would come in, but most Publix have diesel generators.
Right.
So are they going to make both investments? And they need to be able to last for multiple day outages, and that's where the diesel shines. So I'd say
everyone at Bank of America drives a Ford F-150. They just plug it in when they get to the parking lot.
Well, they have to be there for the hurricane, though, so they have to have like a hurricane lock-in.
Good point.
But it really comes, all of these questions are back to the cost of the overall installation and the benefits that can be accrued by the utility and then paid to the customer, right? Because again, we can't subsidize our customers to have, to drive F-150s and then pay them basically for that.
Or install a Tesla wall, power wall, or anything like that. Yeah.
And so really that's where I think we have to wait to see where innovation comes on the overall cost, and then where Duke can identify the overall value and come out with programs for our customers.
Okay.
So one of the hot topics now is ESG, and and having companies have metrics around that. Is there a role for Duke to play in their individual customers' ESG, obviously on the business side, to help them monitor their power use and meet those sustainability goals? Is that something that Maybe that doesn't trickle down to your specific area, but that's something that a lot of companies, both public and private, are looking at right now. What should our ESG goals, and how do I collect that information? That's one of the biggest issues right now, is people don't know what metrics to collect, and if they did know what metrics to collect, they wouldn't know where to get it. Power is going to be part of that, I would think.
So my wife is on their sustainability committee. She works in an engineering firm over in Tampa. She's on their sustainability committee, and they were having a conversation just like this. Basically, how green is the power that the electric utility delivers us today? And she was talking to somebody in Austin, and they pulled out their phone and said, "This is what the Austin electric utility is producing today." And she asked me, "Hans, does Duke do this? Does TECO do this?" And at this time, we don't have that, but I do know that Duke is working on ways that customers can be more aware of their carbon emissions coming from the electricity that we provide them. But again, there's a lot of moving pieces behind going from what actually happens to then communicating that to the customer. There's a lot of more open mechanisms today where customers can access that, like at a Florida level. It's very easy to know the Florida grid's annual electric mix. So I think that's kind of the starting point for that question. But I think where the innovation can come is Duke has programs that can allow our customers to voluntarily buy clean energy RECs that come from solar power plants, that they can basically put their money where their mouth is. Okay. And one of the programs that we have in Florida, Clean Energy Connection, that businesses and residential customers can sign up for, actually has a payback associated with it. So it's a little bit more cost effective when you sign up for it, and then in 7 to 8 years, you actually it goes cost neutral, and then you start to get payback, because it's like you're investing in a solar. Well, it's like you're investing in a solar farm.
Okay.
So there's an upfront capital cost that then you slowly get the return of the energy provided.
Gotcha.
So we have that program. In the Carolinas, we have a program that can time match the energy that we deliver. Because again, there's not much solar energy on the system right now. So we worked on a tariff that we could 24/7 match, the energy that you get as green. So I think there's opportunities for the utility to innovate in that space, because again, a customer in St. Pete, they should not have to be burdened with trying to figure out how can they get 24/7 clean energy. Really, that's an opportunity for the electric utility to try and innovate and come up with programs that they can then sign up for that can match their ESG needs.
Okay, great. Is there any question that you wanted me to ask you tonight? That's my next to the last question is, what should I have asked you that you wanted to share with the crowd?
So I'd say, what's the most interesting thing that I'm not working on? Because it's not in my business field. That would be a good.
Okay, all right. Are you supposed to be working on this? Do they know about this, or?
So I'm an ex-nuke.
Okay.
I think there's a place for nuclear power in the industry. Most people don't really understand it, and it's like people think it explodes. Nuclear plants don't explode. That's a nuclear bomb, which is completely different than a plant. So I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity there, and I think we're going to see the nation move in that direction. Okay. I think that's something that we're going to be reading a lot more in the future of companies, and they're going to be expensive, but they're going to really move the needle on decarbonization and local power. And there was 1,000 people employed at Crystal River. It was the major job center. So there's all these benefits that are associated with nuclear power plants that I think we're going to see come out. And that's going to be interesting to watch. So I think that's something I would tell you to keep an eye out for. And then the other thing, I'll give you 2 answers because I like to cheat, is green hydrogen. Okay. And I call it a fence sitter on green hydrogen still. That if you look at the physics of hydrogen, it's interesting, because a significant portion of our energy mix today comes from fossil fuels, coal, natural gas, and even some oil that we burn. And so hydrogen looks a lot like those assets. So it's something that there's a lot of innovation on. There's a lot of startups working on green hydrogen. And there's a lot of people that want to talk about green hydrogen and want to make investments, but where do I make my investment? And but there's a lot of physics problems behind green hydrogen. And so I think that's the other one that'll be interesting to watch, is where does green hydrogen go? I drive an EV. I'm not worried that I'm going to drive a green hydrogen car ever. That's one that I think I can box out. There might be green hydrogen trucks on the road, but I don't think it'll be my car.
Right.
But really, I wonder in 10, 20, 30 years, what level of power will be produced by green hydrogen, and I think that's going to be an interesting thing.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that hydrogen could be somewhere else in the system powering the electricity to your house, which is charging your car.
Exactly.
And that to me makes sense as long as the math works.
Well, we actually have a small emerging technology office in Charlotte, and they're working on potentially testing a hydrogen storage device where they take electricity from the grid and they make hydrogen, and then they store it, and then they can return the electricity by, it's a fuel cell, so they operate a fuel cell in reverse. And so something like that you can put in your garage. And so maybe the problem of Florida having power outages for too long with lithium assets, you want your AC system to work, maybe you would want to go buy that hydrogen backup power source, where your neighbor, wants to have the higher efficiency, probably more sustainable, we won't go there, lithium battery in their garage, and they say, well, it's okay if I have to turn my AC up.
Okay. All right, fair enough. So my final question is, do you have a challenge for the crowd, for the community, around sustainability, around electric use? What challenges do you have for the community that will help us move faster in these directions and embrace new innovations in this area?
So it's not an exciting one. So
I didn't say exciting, so.
So the federal government just passed a massive tax bill, the IRA, Inflation Reduction Act, and that is going to completely change our space. And at a community level, there's a lot of things in that bill that can help out a community.
Okay.
There's ways that you can basically rip out an old, if you have a gas furnace, which I don't think many people in St. Pete have gas furnaces, but the federal government can help pay to replace gas heating with electric heating. And another fun, so actually this is an exciting one. If anybody in here wants to save like $20 or so per month on your electric bill, a hybrid water heater.
A hybrid water heater.
A hybrid water heater, or a heat pump. It's also known as a heat pump water heater.
Okay.
Where it's a little AC system, and AC systems basically move heat from one place to another. So they're moving heat outside of your house, and that's why your house gets colder. But the hybrid water heaters actually move heat into the water and heat the water up, and they're significantly more efficient. And the federal tax bill has subsidies around that too. And that's, if I wanted to have a startup right now, I'd be reading that thing like crazy.
We actually had a company that's building those applied to the program. So we should talk about that later.
Yeah, there's some, I want to say that some of the old numbers that I had seen, electric water heating is like 15% of the electric power demand on the grid. And, that's with an efficiency of 1, if you will. And the hybrids can be 2 to 3 times as efficient. So you could go from a 15% usage of the energy system all the way down to a 5 if you went from where we are today to everybody having one of these in your house.
That's significant savings.
And the federal government will help you pay for it. Again, back to the boring part of reading the tax bill.
Boring but actionable, so that's
Yeah.
okay. That's what I'm looking for, is how can the community take action to help out. So thank you for sharing that, and thank you for joining us tonight and talking about this. I think there's some good points that you made that we can all kind of think about as we go forward in our day-to-day lives, but also keep an eye on innovation, keep an eye on the startups that are out there, keep an eye on the batteries that we use, and understand that that's going to be part of our energy model going forward. And so very, very exciting. I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.